The next thing we shall discuss about in this series involving the Masons is the Illuminati Masonic connections. Now, if you remember, as I've already stated before, it was General Albert Pike who became the head of the southern jurisdiction of Masonry. Now, among other things, if you look at this medallion here, Pike is wearing, it's also what's known as the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. If you compare his medallion there and just go online and try to find something that talks about the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, you will find that that symbol is the same as you will find in the Kabbalah. And if you remember, it's the Kabbalah that is the religion of Masonry, and it's through the Kabbalah that they're worshiping Lucifer. Now, Pike, along with the second head of the Order of the Illuminati, which was Giuseppe Mazzini, had reorganized, and as one Masonic writer had stated, Pike had brought the Masonic Lodge out of the log home and put it into the temple. This is what Pike had done for Masonry. He was an incredible advocate and practitioner of the occult. But Pike was also one of those rare, very, very rare geniuses you'd get in a generation. I mean, Pike was one of those people who could actually read, write, and fluently speak 18 ancient languages. This man was also very prolific in his writing, so Pike was one of those rare geniuses. Now, as you recall, and I want to read this again just to reiterate a point here. Pike and Mazzini was constantly writing letters back and forth to each other. In one of those, in a couple of those, I should say, correspondence, one in particular, which was dated July 14th, 1889, Pike wrote back to Mazzini and said, "That which we say to the crowd is, we worship a God, but it is the God one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign, grand, instructed generals," and that is a 33rd degree Mason, "we say this. You may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of the initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine." And just as the other examples we had already cited from Pike's book, Moral and Dogmas, they themselves, by his own admonition, see Lucifer as the god of light. Not the bad God, you know, he's not even a god, he's just a fallen angel, but they consider Lucifer to be the god of light. Now, it was Dr. Adam Weishaupt, who was the very head of the organization of the Illuminati, who devised all of the inner workings and occult methodology by which they would practice Luciferian witchcraft. But it was really Baron Adolf von Koenig who recruited the key members inside the Illuminati. It was actually because of Baron Adolf von Koenig that the 2,000 wealthiest, most influential political people in Germany had been brought into the organization of the Illuminati. Now, it was only 1 year later, in 1777, that Weishaupt had started his plan of infiltration. He started infiltrating the Masons, the Rosicrucians, Jacobinism, and other occult schools of his day and age. And he was bringing out the best and brightest minds and bringing them into the Order of the Illuminati. Now, in 1777, he had successfully infiltrated the Masons. He himself became an entered apprentice. And by the time July 16, 1782 came about, the famous Council of Wilhelmsbad had happened, in which the 23 Supreme Councils of the Masonic world had set representatives to meet with Dr. Adam Weishaupt, and at the end of 30 different sessions, they signed a blood contract with the Illuminati, vowing to follow their 7-part plans towards the creation of a new world order. Weishaupt himself had reorganized and reassigned the levels of Illuminism at the time. There were now 13 different degrees, and if you study the titles, not just the inner ones, but the outer ones, you'll see how he was marrying the Masonic world into the Illuminati world. As I said, the infiltration process had already begun back in 1782. So by the time 1789 came about, when the French Revolution had happened and Congress had passed the 2 great seals of the United States, which are in fact the 2 seals of the Order of the Illuminati, many things had come about by that point, by that time, and there was a lot more that would be coming. Now, one thing I want you folks to take a good look at, and as I said, I have quite the extensive collection of Masonic and occult books. Not that there's any difference, but in the Masonic world, they have many different codes that they will use throughout different grades. For those of you who may have any coded, and I do mean coded Illuminati or Masonic books, these are some of the most common codes that they will use. Now, for those of you who are watching and you want to take a copy of this, I would just suggest you pause the DVD at this point and just start writing it down as I have written it out myself. Years later, it would be information like this that would be handed over to Karl Theodor, who was the Elector of Bavaria at the time. He was the Elector of Bavaria because he was also the highest ranking nobility in that area. He was a duke. And it is this gentleman here, His Grace Karl Theodor, the Duke of Bavaria. It was him who had, once he had gone through all the materials that had been brought to him at a trial, he forever banned the Order of the Illuminati and Masonry in his country ever again. Now you would think that if the Masons are supposed to be such good people, well, they would point out just how evil and bad the Illuminati and Weishaupt was. But instead of vilifying him, they actually glorify Weishaupt. This is what they have to say about him. Now, in the Encyclopedia of Masonry, on pages 997 through 999, this is what it says. Speaking of Dr. Adam Weishaupt, he is celebrated in the history of Masonry as the founder of the Order of Illuminati of Bavaria. Weishaupt's place in history should be among the unsuccessful reformers and not among the profligate adventurers. Now, what's really interesting is in Pike's book, Morals and Dogma, on page 840, he says that hidden and lost knowledge had been given over to the Order of the Illuminati. And there was another book, I can't think of the title off the top of my head, I will, where it says light and illumination. And they're speaking about the light and an illumination that comes into the Masonic order. They say light and illumination comes to them from the Illuminati. Now, at this time of history, the infiltration of America had already begun. I mean, it really had started flourishing here in America. Illuminati lodges were popping up all over the place through the Masonic temples. And some of the more influential members in the early days of the American Revolution, such as this one, this would be Governor DeWitt Clinton. This was the governor now, who also was a member of the Order of the Illuminati. Another person was that famous writer, that would be Horace Greeley, right here, would be one of the earliest drawings of Horace Greeley. Now, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here or be mean about it, but the Masons is a system you really need to stay away from. If you're in it, you need to resign from it immediately. Now, I do know one thing, and I've said this ever since I first started this ministry 30 years ago. I know for a fact that 95% of all Masons are absolutely in the dark about what's going on. It's only the top 5% that know what's going on. But for those of you who have seen and watched this DVD, you are no longer without excuse. You've seen the truth for yourself, and I know most of you have read at least the quotes I've said on Albert Pike, because at one time when a person was initiated as an entered apprentice, they were given a copy of Albert Pike's Moral and Dogmas. It was actually considered the Bible of the Masonic world at one point, and every member was given one. Now, here is what I consider to be very solid proof as far as those Masons who are purposely kept in the dark about what's really going on in the Masonic temples. From Morals and Dogma, once again, page 819, it says, the blue degrees, now the blue degrees are the first 3 degrees of Masonry. The entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master Mason, those are known as the blue degrees. The blue degrees, and mind you, before I forget, that's why it's also referred to as the Blue Lodge. The blue degrees are but the outer court or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. In another document, as a matter of fact, it's the Illuminati's Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. On page 55, it says, it is this which has served as the basis for our organization of secret masonry, which is not known to, and aims which are not even so much as suspected by these chattel, attracted by us into the show army of Masonic lodges in order to throw dust in the eyes of their fellows. And you see, that's what they are talking about. Many of the Masons think that they know exactly what's going on and that they know the secrets of Masonry, but they don't know the true inner secrets, because that's just a show part of Masonry. They don't know what the true inner meanings are. And one other example says, Masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objects. And that's from the Illuminati's quotations. This is how the Illuminati view Masonic lodges and their people. We, and they're speaking of the Illuminati here, shall create and multiply free Masonic lodges in all countries of the world, absorb into them all who may become or who are prominent in public activity. But in these lodges we shall find our principal intelligence, office, and means of influence. All these lodges will be composed of these learned elders. The lodges will have their representatives who will serve to screen the above-mentioned administration of Masonry, and from whom will issue the watchword and program. The most secret political plots will be known to us and fall under our guiding hands on the very day of their conception. So you see, even the Masons themselves, while they are trying to lie and hide the truth from everyone, they themselves are being deceived. Now, there are those people, historically speaking, who have tried to warn Americans and others what have been going on in the Illuminati and the Masons, that they are interconnected and that they have literally been trying to take over excuse me, our country and other nations of the world. One of those people who tried to warn us about Illuminati activity was President George Washington. Now, President George Washington had received a letter from the Reverend G.W. Snyder about Illuminati activity on American soil. The Reverend thought that George Washington may have disbelieved that there was such a thing as the Illuminati and their activities in the political affairs of America. George Washington had sent a letter back to him and said the following: Reverend Sir, it was not my intention to doubt the doctrine of the Illuminati. The principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more satisfied of this fact than I am. See, Washington was well aware of the activities of the Illuminati on American soil. And it was this gentleman here, Professor John Robinson, who was the secretary to the Royal Society of Edinburgh, who wrote a book during the time, shortly after the trial of the Illuminati had begun in Bavaria, Germany. He wrote a book that I would recommend to everyone to read. It's called Proofs of a Conspiracy. In that book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, the actual court trial of the Illuminati is in it, and the court records, the verbatim records, are in it. So for those of you who want a good look at what was going on in the order of the Illuminati in that day and age, I strongly recommend you read Proofs of a Conspiracy. Now, the one thing that saddens me about the whole thing that went on back then is that for the first and only time, the Illuminati could have been stopped. They could have just been completely destroyed. But to put it shortly, they were basically given a slap on the wrist and just said, no, 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 don't do that again. And that's all there was to it. And who also reported on the same events of that day and age was the Abbé Barul. He wrote a particular book. You could tell it's a very well-written, very scholarly, literate piece of work. It's called Memoirs Illustrating the History of Jacobinism. And this is a copy of the book that he had written of. Now, George Washington wasn't the only one who was trying to warn people of what was really going on back in those day and age. There was many, many people, very well-educated, very knowledgeable people. None of these people would be considered, a prankster or a conspiracist or any people like that. One person who did write about what was going on was Dr. David Papin, who was the president of Harvard University. And it was during 1978, at the July 19th commencement of the graduating class, he warned and lectured to all those students on the influence that the Illuminati was having on American politics and religion. Now, John Adams, who was one of the original 3 writers for the Constitution of the United States of America, and another one of the other ones would have been right here, Thomas Jefferson. John Adams opposed Thomas Jefferson for the presidency of the United States of America because he knew of Jefferson's involvement in the organization of the Illuminati. Now, at the Wittenberg Square Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, there are a number of letters, 3 of them, that we have, that was written to Colonel William L. Stone on how John Adams had written to him and exposed Thomas Jefferson's activity within the Illuminati. And it is these 3 letters that is credited to winning John Adams the 1800 election. The Reverend Jebediah Morse, who was the father of Samuel Morse, who invents Morse code, he preached in 1798 that the Order of the Illuminati has its branches established and its emissaries at work in America. Now, years later, another president of Harvard University, and that would be Dr. Joseph Willard, on July 4th, 1812, said the following in his commencement speech. There is sufficient evidence that a number of societies of the Illuminati have been established in this land. They are doubtless striving to secretly undermine all our ancient institutions, civil and sacred. These societies are clearly leagued with those of the same order in Europe. We live in an alarming period. The enemies of all order are seeking our ruin. Should infidelity generally prevail, our independence would fall, of course. Our Republican government would be annihilated. And he's right. Look at what's going on nowadays. The old British bulldog himself, Sir Winston Churchill, who was a Prime Minister of England, warned of the Illuminati's activities throughout the world. He said, from the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx, to those of Trotsky, Bela Kun, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy has been steadily growing. This conspiracy played a definitely recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century. And now at last, this band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically the undisputed master of that enormous empire. Sir Winston Churchill was referring to those events that had transpired during the Russian Revolution of 1917. And he himself easily pointed to the fact that all these events that's led up to this period of time were caused by the Illuminati. Now, one of my favorite authors was Nesta Webster. She wrote in a very scholarly style. Her arguments were extremely persuasive, and I can think of at least 25 different major newspapers who lauded nothing but heaps of praises whenever this lady printed a new book. One book in particular, which the newspapers were just raving about when it came out, was World Revolution. Now, on page 78 of her book, World Revolution, Nesta Webster says, while these events, and she was referring to the French Revolution of 1789, while these events were taking place in Europe, the New World, and she was speaking of America, had been Illuminized. As early as 1786, a Lodge of the Order of the Illuminati had been started in Virginia, and this was followed by 14 others in different cities. One of the most compelling documents I've ever seen as far as Illuminati activity in America is found in the report of the California Senate Investigating Committee on Education dated 1953. It says, so-called modern communism is apparently the same hypocritical and deadly world conspiracy to destroy civilization that was founded by the secret order of the Illuminati in Bavaria on May 1st, 1776, and that raised its hoary head in our colonies here at the critical period before the adoption of our federal Constitution. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, from the late 1700s all the way up to the latter part of the 1900s, you have had educators, scholars, authors, statesmen, prime ministers, people of so many different backgrounds who were trying to warn us about the infiltration of the Illuminati into American territory. You couldn't actually point to any one of those individuals and just call them a right-wing conspiracist or right-wing nut. It just isn't going to work. These people were too well educated and they just knew too much about what was going on. Now, there's an old expression that says, like attracts like. My mother used to tell me that you'll always be known by the company you keep. Let me show you some photos here, and I'll show you where I'm going with all this later on. Now, this is a photo of Aleister Crowley. Now, Aleister Crowley's own mother knew her son was such a vile, such a wicked individual that she even referred to him as the beast of Revelation. And he even was known by his, well, I should say, she referred to him as Mr. 666. It was his contemporaries that referred to him as the beast of the book of Revelation. He was not only the founder of the Order of the Lima, he also founded the Ashram Argenium, which from the Latin is the Silver Star, and eventually he became the leader of the OTO, which is another occult society, which is the Ordi Templi Orientis, or the Order of the Oriental Temple. This gentleman here was Dr. Gerard Incasso. He was also, not only was he a member of the Illuminati, but he eventually became head of the occult group known as Martinism. Here's one that will be immediately recognizable by most people who know their occult background. This was Gerald Bruce Gardner. He was not just a prolific occult writer, he was also, according to many people, back then one of the most powerful witches alive. His style of witchcraft caught on and became so popular that to this very day there is a style of witchcraft named after him and after his methodology, and that's known as Gardnerian witchcraft. This gentleman here is Manly P. Hall. He was the co-founder of the Philosophical Research Society, and he was also a Rosicrucian. Here is Eliphas Levi. In his day and age, I don't think there was a more prolific occult writer alive. It was also Eliphas Levi who came up with the symbol that has been used in Satanism ever since he created it. This is the mezzanine goat, or what's known as the mezzanine goat head. This, as I just stated, was drawn by Eliphas Levi himself and is still used as the official logo of those who practice Satanism. This gentleman, this was S.L. McGregor Mathers. Now here he's dressed in his high priest costume, and among other things, he was also one of the co-founders of the Order of the Golden Dawn. Here is George Pickengill. He was known as the leader of the Pickengill Covens in England. Interesting story about this man is he used to be able to extort free beers from different pubs around the area by threatening the owner with being hexed if they didn't give him a drink. Oh yeah, I mean, and no one really seemed to argue the point. They just gave him, you know, his pint or bitter, as we also call it in England. Here is Theodore Russ, who was the founder of the Order Templi Orientis, or as I just stated previously, the Order of the Oriental Temple, excuse me. And this next gentleman will be familiar to most people who know anything about the occult. This is Alexander. He was known as the King of the Witches in London. Again, this man was considered to be one of the most knowledgeable, one of the most powerful witches in his day and age. His style of witchcraft, because of the cause and effect of it, became so popular that another style of witchcraft was named, and it's known as Alexandrian witchcraft. It is this book, one of the books that he himself was responsible for writing. And if you notice, at the bottom, he does take the title, King of the Witches. This is Dr. William R. Woodman, and he was one of the original 3 founders of the Order of the Golden Dawn, another occult society. This gentleman, Arthur Edward Waite, he was not just an occult writer, but he created what became one of the most popular version of the tarot cards in existence. And this is his book, which is called The Pictorial Guide to the Tarot. Now, for those of you who have ever seen tarot deck, the odds are you will see this one on on your right. You will have seen those cards at one point or another. As stated, this really did become the most popular version of the tarot cards that I'm aware of in all of history. And this was done by Arthur Edward Waite. Last but not least is Dr. William Wynne. Dr. William Wynne Westcott. And he himself was a practicing Rosicrucian, and here he is in his official outfit as one of the main leaders of the Rosicrucian order. Allow me to show you these people one more time. There's a point I'm purposely reiterating, and as we go through these things, you will find out very quickly the overall point I'm trying to make. Over here, we have Aleister Crowley, who was the founder of the occult order known as Thelema. He was also the one who founded the Order of the Astra Marginium, the Order of the Silver Star, and he also eventually became the head of the OTO. Over here, Dr. Gerard Incarso, who was a member of the Illuminati and who eventually became the leader of another occult group known as Martinism. Over here, Gerald Gardner. His style of witchcraft was considered so efficient and was so popular that a style of witchcraft was named after him, known as the Gardnerian style of witchcraft. And it's also Gerald Gardner that most Wiccan or pagan groups will fall back to because he's considered the father of modern-day paganism. Manly P. Hall, he was the founder and creator of another occult society known as the Philosophical Research Society. He also was one of the most prolific writers of his day and age, and he was also a Rosicrucian. Over here we have Eliphas Levi. Not only was he a prolific writer, he wrote many books especially on high ceremonial magic, and he was the one who created the design that's used for just about every satanic group, or the vast majority of them nowadays, the mezzanine goat, or the goat head of Mendes. S. L. McGregor Mathers, one of the co-founders of the occult school known as the Order of the Golden Dawn. Next one, George Pickengill, who was a renowned master witch of the 19th century in England, who was also the leader of the Piccadilly Covens in England. Dr. Theodore Russ. He was also the head of the occult order known as the OTO, or the Ordine Templi Orientis. He himself became such a prolific writer that he could not keep up with the OTO and gave all of the authority over to Aleister Crowley. The next gentleman is Alex Sanders. Again, another witch whose style of witchcraft was so popular and effective that a style of witchcraft was named after him, known as Alexandrian witchcraft. He also was labeled the king of all witches in London. The next one is Dr. William Woodman. He was a British physician and a practicing occultist, and he was chosen by William Westcott to become one of the 3 leaders of the occult order known as the Order of the Golden Dawn. Arthur Edward Wade. Not only was he a practicing occultist, a witch, but he also created the most popular set of tarot cards in existence. And Dr. Wynne Westcott. He was an occult practitioner. He was a member of the Order of the Rosicrucians and of the Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, not only were all these members practicing witches or Satanists, one other common thread that all these people in the occult had were each and every single one of them were Masons. Remember what I told you? There was an old expression that says, like attracts like. And my mother used to tell me, you are known by the company you keep. Every single one of these people we've just gone through, not only were they witches or Satanists, but they were also Masons. I think by now it becomes quite apparent that there is an Illuminati connection into the Masonic world. You don't have this type of gallery of infamous occultists into a group that is supposed to be just a bunch of good old boys. Now what we're going to be doing, we're going to take a further look into this Masonic connection into the Order of the Illuminati with something I had promised on the first DVD of this new series many, many months ago. So without any ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end it here. We're going to further get into this Masonic Illuminati connection. For those of you who have been following this DVD series since the beginning, it was on the first DVD, which is called The Arrival of the Antichrist, that we went over the connection of the Order of the Illuminati and the Masonic world through the maps of Washington, D.C. and the Great Seals of the United States of America. Now, let me just go over something one last time. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm just going to show it to you quickly. This was the original map of Washington, D.C., and it was accepted by Congress. It would be here that our state capitol and all the other known monuments would eventually be set up. Now, what I'm going to show you right now are 2 simple tourist maps. This is just a couple maps you can find anywhere literally on the streets of Washington, D.C. as far as, simple tourist maps go. Now, let's take a look at this first one very carefully. And as I pointed out, the map itself has been purposely done in such a way that there are occult symbols that make up this entire section of Washington, D.C. Over here, we have the upside down 5-pointed star, or what's known also as the mezzanine goat head. Up here, 13 city blocks from Washington, from the White House itself, is the House of the Temple. This is where you become a 33rd degree Mason. Other symbols of the Masonic world that proves their influence into the occult world can be found right here. We have, first of all, what looks like a satanic stick figure, but it's actually the combination of two Masonic symbols. One is known as a compass, a regular mathematic compass that you would use on a map, right here, and here are the legs extended. Over here, we have the Masonic square. Now, these only work when you connect them to certain monuments and roads. That's the only way this works. Now, as I previously stated, this makes up the triplicity of sixes. This is sacred Illuminati territory now. Because the Bible identifies this satanic stick figure under the numbers of 666 in Revelation 13:18. The Washington Monument is exactly 555 feet above ground, 111 feet below ground, which makes up 666 feet total. If you go to the surveyor's map and check out this section of Washington, D.C., the map itself identifies this area as lot 666. So you have 3 sets of sixes marking this area as sacred territory in the order of the Illuminati. Now, I'm going to show you that if you were to pull out another map, it doesn't change. The symbols and such are there. It doesn't matter which tourist map you use, you're still going to find all these occult symbols, all these Masonic symbols, and that they meet and join, symbolically speaking, the Masonic world and the Illuminati world at the White House itself. Now, there are many naysayers and people who say, well, those symbols really aren't there, or this is just a coincidence, or you just don't know what you're talking about. Well, I know some of the people, such as Brett Morris, who's the managing editor of the Southern Jurisdiction magazine of Masonry, himself is among those naysayers. He doesn't think, for instance, that that style there is there. He doesn't believe any of this really goes on. And as I stated back in that first DVD, I would prove once and for all, because I'm so sick and tired of the Masons lying to you, to me, and to everyone else, that these things not only go on, but I can prove to you that there's another spot that the Masons themselves had drawn. Now, when we take a good look, let me just get the photos for you, ladies and gentlemen. There was a place in Ohio. It's known as Sandusky, Ohio. And here is a photo of Sandusky, Ohio. Now, just looking at this plaque, it doesn't look like much until you read what's on the plaque itself. Hector Kilbourne, a Freemason and the surveyor who made the original plat of Sandusky as Portland in 1816, laid out the streets to form the Masonic emblem. Huron and Central Avenues are the arms of the compass, Elm and Poplar Streets, the sides of the Mason Square. The first Masonic lodge in Sandusky was founded in 1819 with Kilbourne as master. The Masonic temple that they were referring to on that plaque is this one right here. Now, it's interesting to note exactly where it is positioned, but you can't tell just by looking at this photo. What I'm going to do is take out a copy of the Sandusky, Ohio street map, and we're going to see if the Masons did or did not create, once again, the Masonic symbols into the earth. Using a simple street map. Again, take a good look at this map, ladies and gentlemen, and you will notice at first glance there is nothing about it that would cause anyone to raise an eyebrow. And yet, the section we need to take a good look at is this area right here. If you take a good look, ladies and gentlemen, right here is an enlarged photo of that area. I want you to just focus on this large section now. Remember, according to the description, the roads make up the actual Masonic symbols themselves. Huron and Central Avenues are the arms of the compass, and Elm and Poplar Street make up the square. So what we're going to do is simply follow what they told us to do. And if we put it right here and compare, you can see right here for yourself how Huron and Central make up the compass, and Poplar and Elm Street make up the Masonic square. They've done it again. They lied to you when they said, oh, this is a coincidence, or these things don't happen, or you just don't know what you're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is there. The Masons have, as they have so many times in the past, have lied to you outright. I think it is too obvious for anyone to deny. And here, once again, we just add the last bit of evidence is the Masonic hexagram itself, because all this symbol here, when you connect the compass and the square together, it's just an abbreviated form of the hexagram that is the official mark of the Illuminati. They use this whenever they use high ceremonial witchcraft or high ceremonial magic. It is a must, and it is the foulest, the most perverted, the most evil of all symbols in the occult world. And even the plaque itself on Masonic symbols point out the fact that these roads were indeed laid out by the Masons, who, if you remember back on the first DVD, claims that these things don't happen. I think it's obvious by now that not only is there a Masonic Illuminati connection, but that, as always, when they're trying to hide something, according to their obligations, the Masons lie. I am tired of them trying to lie to us and get away with it. It's about time someone speaks up for Christianity and tells a Christian this is wrong. And I am going to be the one who has to do it if no one else will. The Masons have lied. The Masons have done so many bad things in the past, including denying the name of Christ, the Bible, and so many other things out of the foundations of Christianity. I can't see how anyone in their right minds could possibly stay in the order of the Masons, let alone become a Mason. What we're going to do, we're going to continue on with revealing more information about the order of the Masons and exactly how they are affecting us to this very day. The last thing I wanted to show you about the Masonic world were their secret handshakes and other things. You see, if you remember before, one of my friends in the courtroom had lost what was considered to be an easy case. He was supposed to have won it just by coming back in, but once the Mason there had given the grand hailing sign of distress, everything turned against him and he lost the case. Now, if you recall, on the maps of Washington, D.C., we showed what's the area known as the House of the Temple. This is the place where you go to become a 33rd degree Mason. And if you look at it, it looks like you're like you're in a throne room. This is how they consider themselves, at least those people at the top. They consider that they themselves would be rulers of the world because they believe that eventually they will be rulers of the world. Now, as I stated, there are a number of signs and such I want you to take a good look at. We won't go through many of them. I could go through every single degree if I wanted to, but for the sake of time and for the sake of not boring you to death, I'm only going to show you some of them. Now, these here are the different do-God signs and grips that you will be taught when you are an entered apprentice. Should you see anyone you know of using any of these signs or such, I guarantee you, any of these will tell you that they are automatically an entered apprentice in the Masonic organization. The next one will be the Fellowcraft do-God, signs, and hand grips. Study these carefully, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you're in a situation where the law can suddenly turn against you. For those in the Masonic world who have become a Master Mason, this is a number of their symbols and signs and secret handshakes. What you need to do is to pay attention to this one. This is, for the Master Mason, the sign of distress. Remember, as we have already pointed out throughout this DVD, that if a brother Mason sees this hailing sign of distress, they must do whatever it takes to get their brother out of trouble. This is what a member of the Master Mason degree would do. Now, these next grips and signs belong to that of a 4th degree Mason known as a mock master. And as I just stated, all these you will find at the level of the 4th degree of Masonry. The 5th degree is known as a past master. You will notice the sign and the do-God. You watch these carefully. This next one is the do-God and grip of a most excellent master or a 6th degree Mason. And here is the Royal Arch degree, where 3 Masonic members will get together and quite literally form what looks like the arch of a temple. And if you recall, the grand hailing sign of distress, for those Masons who have reached, the higher levels and such, looks exactly like this. The feet are crossed, the fingers are interlocked and held over the hand, and the individual or the Mason will say, "Is there no one who will help the widow's son?" And this story, interesting enough, this picture tells the story of a Mason who was out in the wilderness in the early days of America and had come across a tribe of Indians, and they were going to kill him until he made the Masonic sign of distress. And this Indian here, who was taught, supposed to have been taught, I believe in England, recognized this, the grand hailing sign of distress and stopped his fellow people from killing this man, and they made sure that this Mason made it back to civilization without a hair of his head being touched. That's how long-reaching the grand hailing sign of distress is for the Mason. Now if you look here, we have the Royal Arch Due God and sign and the Royal Arch Grand Hailing sign. You notice the difference between that one is that the feet aren't crossed here. And of course, these signs and symbols and such go all the way up to the 33rd degree, as I said before, and I'm not going to belabor the point. I believe you've seen enough of these so that once you see them, you will recognize them for what they are. Now, the 33rd degree Mason is given at the House of the Temple. The one below it, which is known as the 32nd degree, that's within it there is a group of 32nd degree Masons. They're known as Shriners. Now, people have heard of the Shriners before, I'm sure, with the Shriners Parade, the Shriners Burn Centers, the Shriners Hospitals, and there are a lot of good people trying to do good for children and other people. But that does not mean, according to the Masonic writings, through their own book, that these people are guaranteed a ticket to heaven. If nothing else, they clearly state that Masonry is not a ticket to heaven. Now, the 32nd degree Masons, who usually ride around in those cutesy little cars, will wear what's known as a fez. That's those red conical hats that sit on top of their heads. Now, the story goes that in the 8th century, there was approximately 50,000 Christians in this one city. I believe I don't remember exactly what it was called, but Muslims attacked the city because the Christians would claim that God was Jesus Christ and not Allah. And as the Christians' blood just literally ran down the streets, the Muslims took their white hats off, which were known as fezzes, dipped them in the Christians' blood, which were now covered in red, the fezzes, and cried out, "There is only but one God, Allah." Now, whether or not this story is true or not really doesn't matter, because I believe we have produced and provided more than sufficient evidence which says no Christian who's a Mason should remain in it, and no one who's thinking about it should have anything to do with it. I have myself have been invited over the last 30 years to become a Mason 3 times. And what's interesting is Masons are not supposed to be recruiting people into their organization. Had it been properly done, I was supposed to go petition them for membership, but that's not how it works. Many times, and as I said, had they known who I was at the time, I would never have been invited. They probably would have invited me out to have been lynched. But the fact of the matter is, yes, they will go out and recruit people, even though they claim they don't. Once and for all, to all the born-again Christians out there, the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, told us that, well, it's up to our own individual conscience. Why? Because Dr. Larry had done a poor job of examining the Masons. Why? Because he was thinking of becoming a Mason himself. So I'm going to make a judgment call here, which I honestly feel is necessary. If the Southern Baptist Convention won't make a stand, if no one else will tell you the truth, then let me tell you it. Do not become a Mason. They are based upon the Luciferian doctrine. They deny Christ. They deny his teaching. They deny his salvation. They deny his own word. What Christian in their right mind would do this? None, as far as I'm concerned, unless you are so backslidden you can't see the truth for what it is. I implore every single Christian right now who is a Mason, fill out your letter of resignation, tell them you'll have nothing more to do with them, and just submit it. If you have any problems with any of this material, or if you need to contact me about any of this, you can contact me directly through Cutting Edge Ministry. They will tell you how you can eventually get a hold of me. I pray that all this information was sufficient enough for you folks to see the truth for what it is. Again, as I said, if you need any help with any of this, you just contact me and I will do the best to help you. Now God keep you and God protect you, and I pray God helps you make the right decision.